Nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to the first of the Toi Toi Ako Wednesday webinar series. Ko eri na korohina tōku ingoa, ko Ngāti Parau tōku iwi. I am the kaiarahi nutrition for Toi Tangata. In case this is the first time that you've connected in with Toi Tangata, we are a Māori agency that develops, delivers and champions kaupapa Māori approaches to movement, health and nutrition. We specialise in positive health and work hard to create meaningful connections to kaupapa oranga Māori. Our training activities include our annual hui ato, which we just had recently in Apu Moana Marae over in Aotearoa. We also do whanau and Toi Ako webinars like this one. We're also involved in developing resources. We partner up with different research partners and we support policy development amongst a whole lot of other things. So if you're interested in finding out more about Toi Tangata, please go to our website. We are at www.toitangata.co.nz, or we are also on Facebook, so jump on there and like us. We always like that. Today we are here with Dr Anna Rolleston, who is from Ngāti Rangi Nui, Ngai Te Rangi and Ngāti Pukenga. Anna is the director of the Centre for Health and is based here in Tauranga. She holds academic positions with the University of Waikato and the University of Auckland. Anna's work in the equity and Māori health space includes kaupapa Māori research, governance roles, and enacting equity by enabling total health and wellbeing solutions at the Centre for Health. In her kōrero today, Anna will be covering some of the reasons why heart disease is such a big issue in Aotearoa and how lifestyle management from an iwi perspective can really make a difference. She'll provide learnings from a kaupapa Māori heart disease risk reduction trial that was held across the Bay of Plenty. And she'll touch both on the Western science and the mātauranga Māori, exploring the past, the present and the future, and sharing key messages for our whanau to improve heart health. So you're all on the first webinar series for Toi Tangata. This is also the first webinar that I have facilitated. So, so this is how I'm hoping it's all going to roll. The webinar will last for an hour. And on your screen, you should have the option of a little tab called Q&A. I think it should be about here. If you have any questions throughout Anna's kōrero, please feel free to type in the questions. And if we aren't able to get to them straight away, we will definitely answer them at the end of the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded, so it will be uploaded onto our Toi Tangata YouTube channel. It'll probably take about a week for us to get it up on there, but it will be available there as well. Also, post this webinar, we'll be sending out an email to everybody just to get an evaluation on how you think the webinar went, but also to feed in and inform us on any workforce development opportunities you think should happen or could be supported by Toi Tangata. So, without further ado, I'd like to pass you into the very capable hands of Dr Anna Rolleston. Kia ora, Anna.
Kia ora, Ina. Nā mihi mahana kia koutou. Ko Anna Rolleston tōku ingoa, no tauranga mōna hau. This is the first time I've ever done a webinar, so I was saying to Edina before, the first time I've ever spoken to no one. But I know you're out there. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along. I'm not quite sure how that works in terms of them coming up for me, but I'm more used to an interactive type environment. So yeah, go for it. So let's just see if we can make this work. Share screen, yeah. Yep.
And then go share screen down here. And then push your PowerPoint start.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, good. Okay, so the title of today's talk is Iwi Heart Health, and I suppose the kōrero for today is really looking at heart health from a Māori perspective, and using some of the experiences that we've had in our work that we do here in the Bay. So I'm not much of a stats person, but I thought I would start with some stats because we are talking about a little bit about Western science and a little bit about mātauranga. So in terms of heart disease, this is a fairly well-known table. So on, can you see the pointer? Oh yeah, cool. So on this side of your picture, you've got male death rates from heart disease. So we've got ischemic heart disease here, and you can see over time, sorry I've cut off the bottom, but this is years going along, is that heart death rates have significantly reduced over time. And on this side of the graph we've got women. So this is a graph that is often used to show how well we're doing in terms of heart health, because death rates have dropped over the years. Now, interestingly, if we look at that data by ethnicity, and this is for men, you'll notice that from 2006 to 2014, there hasn't been much movement in terms of the rate of death. But the important thing in this graph is really the disparity. So we've got Māori in red, we've got Pacific in blue, and we've got our European counterparts here in black. So we've got in a gap, and we all know this gap exists. So we're not potentially doing as well as what the previous graph might suggest that we are, because we've got this massive gap between Māori and Pacific mainly, and non-Māori and non-Pacific, who do a little bit better in terms of heart disease. So that's the graph for men. And this is the one for women, which is not that much different. There's quite a big gap here, and you'll notice that our female Pacific Island cousins are pretty well near up where we are in terms of death rates. So that's just a little bit of an overview from the Western science perspective. I think stats are a great thing, but often I have a bit of an issue with stats, because we all know these numbers, we all know there's this issue, we all know that there are disparities, and kind of talking about the fact that there are disparities, in my opinion, isn't doing anything about them. If we continually just keep talking about the fact that we've got these issues, we're not actually doing anything about them. So we all know there's this problem. We all know there's a problem. There's massive inequity for Māori in terms of heart health and in terms of health in general. And one of the problems in the system is the reporting of those numbers, because in general terms, when you're an organisation like a DHB, for example, that has to report to ministry on targets, we report on data for the general population. So if you guys haven't seen this tool before, this is called Trendly, and you can see the URL at the top here, trendly.co.nz. Trendly is a really awesome tool. It was developed here in the Bay, so I'm skiting a little bit about that, by Dr. George Gray. And what Trendly is an ability to look at the data that we would report to the ministry by ethnicity. So this is just a screenshot of the last quarter of data from Trendly, and I'm not going to go into the detail here, but basically you've got DHBs across the top, you've got the ministry targets down the side here, and without getting into what all the numbers are, essentially it's your traffic light system. If you're green, then you've met the target, and any movement away from green towards red is how far away from meeting the target you are. So obviously any red on the screen shows that that's quite a way away from meeting the target. So if we just look at Bay of Plenty, for example, I really like this slide because there's lots of green for us here compared to other DHBs. So on the surface, we can say, hey, we're doing really well. Look at all the targets we're meeting. Look how green we are compared to other DHBs. But you'll notice here we've got this. Okay, so this is the data for non-Māori. So if we were to click over here and change the screen, it becomes a completely different picture. And so this is why generalised data is not a flash way of looking at what's happening in a population in terms of health, because generalised data hides inequity. And this is exactly the same quarter, exactly the same information for all of the targets, for all the DHBs, and there's hardly any green anywhere on the screen. So we all know that this problem exists, and not just in heart health, but across the board. So the question I've always got in terms of talking about this data to people is, this isn't new. This red and orange screen has existed perpetually. Why isn't it changing? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is how do we get this to change? If it's been relatively perpetual for a number of years, which it has been, what's going to make the difference to change this into green? Okay, so the question's why? Why is that screen red and orange? And why was the previous screen mostly green? And you guys have seen these pictures, I'm sure, and this is the big argument, isn't it? Equity is about resourcing those who need it most. So as you know in this picture, the bubba can't see the game because the bubba's got what everyone else has got, but the fence is too high. So Dad gives Bubba the extra box, and now everyone can see the game. So that's what equity is. And so this is kind of a concept that's really bandied around at the moment. We talk quite a lot about equity for Māori and health. But from my point of view, again, hopefully most of you have seen the continuation of the series, is this idea of liberation. So actually the problem's not so much about resourcing and about providing resources to those who need them most. The problem is actually the fence. And the fence is the health system. The fence is the way that we educate health professionals. The fence is the constraints we believe are in front of us that stop us from enabling health for our people. And so really what we should be focusing on is about manipulating the fence. And you know, that's a massive task. And the reality is we're not going to be able to get some sledgehammers and bash the fence down tomorrow. But perhaps we could refashion the fence and make it, I always say, a chicken wire fence. So you can actually see through it. It's still an impediment, but you're better able to see the game. So today's conversation is definitely about equity, but it's moving towards the idea of liberation, which is about how do we change the system constraints that are kind of causing us to have inequity in the first place. Right, so that's a bit of the why. There's also this. So these are my Google stolen images. No reference for these images, I stole them off the internet. This is my kind of idea of what stereotypically Western health is. Western health is a number of different silos of information where people might function really well within each silo, but the silos don't speak to each other. And we all know this about Western science and about Western medicine. It's traditionally a very siloed approach. And if we compare that to my, again, Google stolen image of what I think about Māori health to look like, Māori health definitely has strands of things that are really important. But actually the strength of Māori health is in the weave. It's in the integration of all of those individual components together that gives us strength. So when you look at these two pictures, they're really different. They're very disparate. And so part of the reason why we have this issue of all these red and orange numbers in our stats is because there's a real difference between the way Māori see the world and the way that the health system functions. Okay, so what I'm going to move on to talk about is kind of the past, present and future, as Elena was talking about. It's a bit of a cynical view, I suppose, but really looking forwards to what are we actually going to do? What are we going to do to change the gaps that we've got? So I've called this the past, but sometimes the present, because actually I would hope that the things on this list are in the past, but I know that some of these things are still present now and they shouldn't be. So if we're taking a somewhat cynical view of the past in terms of health for our people, we've definitely got a Western-centric healthcare environment, and that still exists today. In the past, there has been, I put no consultation. I'm sure someone would like to argue that point, but essentially, no consultation with Māori in the past in terms of health system, healthcare delivery, etc., etc. And certainly no consideration of a Māori worldview in terms of health. The evidence base that we use for health, you know, we always talk about the evidence for best practice, and that evidence that we call on for best practice has in the past had no Māori or even any Indigenous evidence used to inform that practice. All evidence is based on a Western-centric evidence collection system. And importantly, in the past, and sometimes in the present, the power in a health relationship sits firmly with the health professional. There is definitely a power dynamic in, has been, because I'm talking about the past, trying not to push into the present, but there has been this real sense of disempowerment for a person who engages in the health system because of the perceived power in the relationship between the health professional and the patient or the person. Medical management has been the form of intervention, so very little outside of what is classified as medical management is provided, has been provided in the past by the system. Māori health professionals have functioned in the past in a Western-centric workplace, so that means that in the past we had Māori working as health professionals in a completely Western environment. So none of this is new to you guys. This is definitely the past, but also some of you will know it happens now as well. So the present, and again, I'm a little bit cynical, in some environments, but not all, we've got kaupapa Māori health services and whole order providers. So that's awesome. We've had a shift from a place where there was no acknowledgement of a Māori view to this kind of place where we're at now, where there are health services that are kaupapa Māori, and we've got all these awesome whole order providers that are doing their best for our people. We've got funding available for kaupapa Māori research and for service development within a kaupapa Māori framework, so that's a step forward. A limited amount of money, I would suggest, but still money available. Māori health professionals are increasing in numbers. We need more Māori in health, in all areas of health, from you know, doctors all the way down to healthcare assistants, and wider than that traditional view of health as well. We need more Māori in all aspects of health, as health is defined in a Māori view. So we need more miri experts. We need more people working in rongoarako. We need more Māori who are understanding the maramataka and how that affects health, etc., etc., etc. So this means more, we're definitely getting increasing numbers of Māori, but we need more in all areas of health, traditional health and Māori defined health. And there's been this move towards person-centred health, and this is a way of kind of combating the previous conversation about power in a relationship between a person and their health professional. And so some of the ways that this has been enacted currently is through patient portals. So if your medical centre doesn't have a patient portal where you can access your own health information, you should be asking them when it's coming. Patient portals allow you to have the access to your own information, which is yours, which has traditionally been held, for example, by a medical centre or by the hospital, that it's very difficult to access. Consultation I was going to say is relatively well known or relatively well used these days. Query that in some environments. And of course, we've got these consumer forums around where health providers or health funders, or even in health research, we're asking the consumer, what do you think? And that's a better space to be in than the traditional power relationship between the person and the system. We've still got a Western-centric system. So regardless of our kaupapa Māori services, our hauora, the funding available for kaupapa Māori, we have essentially a Western-centric system. So going back to my Google stolen images, the one at the top, it's still pretty siloed. It's still a pretty Western in worldview. It's still quite difficult to enact a Māori model within the current system. And even kaupapa Māori funding is still constrained by contracting frameworks that are Western-centric. So you've got a kaupapa Māori service which has to report within a Western framework. Doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense in my world. So that's the present. It definitely looks better than it used to look, but it can be way better. And that's what the future is. And so we talk about potential, knowing our potential. So there are a lot of people who have been ill for a long time, who have had illness in their family, perhaps, especially heart disease, where perhaps there isn't a knowing of their potential, a knowing of the potential that we've got to actually do differently and be different to what we are today, to live the dream basically, or even to dream, to think about what could this life look like for me and my whanau. And so that's kind of what the future is, well, from our point of view here in little old Tauranga Mona anyway. And I really like this whakatauki because it's about potential, and it's about taking advantage of what we've been given to us in terms of the time that we've got here. And that's kind of the hope for Māori health, is actually we've got the world in front of us and we're destined to be great, and we just need to know that so that we can keep rolling on this path. So some of the stuff that in the future is less about the system and more about us. So the past and present slides were really about the constraints that we have based on the system that surrounds us. And for the future, it's my opinion that we should stop thinking about the system, because it's a big beast and difficult to manipulate, and we should start thinking about ourselves and our communities and building something new from there without thinking about the constraints of the system. So what we know about our communities is really important. We're part of community ourselves, but also we're, as Māori health professionals or people working within Māori communities, we should know our communities and we should have strong relationships. So what we know about them is they know what their problems are. We don't need to label them. We don't need to tell them who we think they are based on the stats that we pulled from the latest ministry website. They know who they are and they can define themselves. And so therefore they can define their own problems. And once we know what they think or they know their problems to be, then we're better able to help them. Instead of going to them and saying, hey, you guys all die of heart disease, we've got a solution for you. Because they also know these solutions. So if we have good, strong relationships in our communities, we can understand what the issues are in those communities, and we can hear what they think the solutions are to those problems, because we know that currently most communities have little or no avenue to enact those solutions. So those of us who are in these positions of privilege, like I've had a look at the registration list, like most of you are, we have an obligation to support communities to enact the solutions that they already know will work for them. And that's all our role is. We don't, you know, I might have a set of expertise, but I think we all must remember that the majority of us learned our expertise within a Western-centric context. And that's helpful, but it's a little bit about putting that aside and doing what our communities are asking us to do for them. And really it's about refashioning the fence. So going back to our pictures from the beginning about liberation, the future for healthcare is about refashioning the fence. And again, I know there will be some arguments out there because we're still in this space of equity where we still need to resource those that need it most. And I totally agree, we do need to resource where resources are currently not going, because that will provide equity. But there is a step beyond that, and that is the fence is an issue. What are we going to do about the fence? And so this idea of talking to communities, hearing their problems and them knowing that there are solutions, this isn't new, this is common sense, but it's new for a system that doesn't work like this and has never worked like it. So I'm sure it makes sense to you guys, it certainly makes sense to us, but it's about how you make the fence different. And like I said at the beginning, it's not necessarily bowling down the fence, it's just refashioning it. Okay, so this is kind of our area of expertise, lifestyle management. I just show my Toi Tangata drink bottle that I got at the Hui Ato.
Good plug, good plug.
So this conversation today was supposed to be about heart health and about the undulating challenge for iwi heart health. And I have kind of morphed into a bigger context than that. But if we come back to that idea of lifestyle management, probably has some connotations around it, certainly in a Western context, it's got some connotations around it. But if you think about the word lifestyle, it's how a whanau, or how a community, or how a person defines lifestyle for them. So all of the things that impact on their lifestyle, that they want in their life, that's all of the things that lifestyle management should be. So the traditional Western systems view of lifestyle management tends to be around nutrition, physical activity, and perhaps some mental health. But when I'm talking about lifestyle management, I'm talking about Māori worldview. So what are all of the things that impact the way that we live our lives, the way that we manage our lives? So from a heart disease point of view, we know that heart disease is a lifestyle condition. And we also know that it's totally and utterly preventable. So there are some questions that always arise for me when I talk to whanau about heart disease and about this idea of genetics. So I've got this in my family. This is probably a genetic thing, and certainly we've got there's a research project running through Auckland University at the moment, which is called the Multi-Ethnic New Zealand Study of Acute Coronary Syndromes, which is a study of the genetic factors that contribute to people having a heart attack. So there are some genetics in there, but having some genetics that that say that you're going to end up having heart disease, that's not a given. And it's often this idea that you can blame your genetics for everything. You can blame your parents for everything. You should have picked your parents better, because if you pick your parents better, you wouldn't have the genetics you've got now. But like you know, I think we continue to need to understand that heart disease is a lifestyle condition. It's caused by the way that we live our lives, regardless of what our genetics are. Sure, people with genetic tendency for high cholesterol, for example, have difficulty managing cholesterol to within the constraints of what the system says our cholesterol should be. I will acknowledge that that's the case, but there is so much more to heart disease and lifestyle management than just your cholesterol. So what other factors are needing to be managed? Now, the inevitability point, we did a study here in Tauranga, which was actually a women's heart health project, and we interviewed a whole heap of younger, so say 40 and under Māori, and asked them about their perceptions of heart disease. And overwhelmingly, young Māori women told us that they thought that getting heart disease was inevitable because everyone in their family died of a heart attack, or everyone in their family had heart disease. So why should I eat better? Why should I exercise? Why should I lifestyle manage when I'm probably going to live a short life because everyone around here dies of this? And that was really saddening for me. I was really taken aback. This was in my community too, and in fact, probably some of my whanau saying this stuff. And there is this belief that it's inevitable for our people, and that's fueled by the statistics that we push out, showing that Māori die more of heart disease, that there's this massive gap. So those graphs I showed you in the beginning, they contribute to this understanding or ingrained belief that Māori die of these things. Yeah, they do at the moment, but that doesn't mean that they need to in the future. What is our potential to make this different? So we all know we should eat better and be more active, but we don't do those things. I often say in my talks, if you stood on the street corner and asked every single person who walked past you what they could do to look after their heart, I'm pretty sure that every single person would give you a correct answer. They would talk about eating better, they would talk about doing more exercise. So we know this, but we don't do it. And there's something in that for us. Why don't we do it? There's a really strong link between poor mental health and poor heart health. So if we're looking at point number 2, where we know we should eat better and we know we should exercise if we're thinking about lifestyle management from a Western point of view, why don't we do it? It's probably mostly something to do with the way that we think or our ingrained beliefs. And so then moving into point 3, which is talking about if we've got poor mental health, we've probably got poor heart health, and it actually goes the other way as well. Then there's this big thing about stress, whatever stress means to you. And we know that depression and anxiety are strongly linked to heart disease as well. So if we're thinking about our communities and we're thinking about helping them with heart health and lifestyle management, are we thinking about those things, which from a Western point of view, in terms of Western evidence, we know are strongly linked. And then there's this thing called wairua. And you know, I've read a lot of ministry documents. I've read a lot of documents that say that the system will enact Māori health for Māori, and nowhere in any document have I ever read how you enact wairua for a whanau, because it's too outside the system for the system to even comprehend, let alone write it into a Western document. But we, as Māori health professionals, and those of you who are non-Māori, who work in our Māori communities, this is one of the biggest components of lifestyle management. So we've got to ask ourselves, how do we do this? Who is the right person to do this? If we ignore wairua as a component of lifestyle management, then we're not lifestyle managing, and we aren't going to shift the reds to greens, because it's an integral part of who we are. And so therefore, there needs to be an integral understanding of how it fits in this relationship. So that's a challenge. It's a real challenge for a lot of people, but it can be done, and it should be done. But it should be done by the right people, and I'm not sure that the system is the right person to enact this for our people. This is our responsibility for our people. Okay, So those are kind of the ideas around lifestyle management, some of the challenges that we have in terms of heart disease management, but also in terms of lifestyle management as a whole, because things like diabetes are a major issue in our community, and it's a lifestyle condition. Metabolic syndrome. There's a whole raft of other health issues from a Western point of view where managing lifestyle better will make a significant difference. So as Edina mentioned, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our experience here in the Bay with one of the trials that we've been running. And so this is it here. So it's a 12-week exercise and lifestyle management program, and the aims of the program was to reduce the risk of heart disease in Māori communities. So this is an interesting project because it was a project where we really wanted to prove to the system that a Māori way works. And so therefore, to prove it to the system, we had to have some very strong Western research methods and some very strong Western research outcomes. But also considering we're working solely in Māori communities with a kaupapa Māori philosophy. So a relatively challenging project in terms of, not for us to run, certainly not at all, not for us to even think about, but challenging to get money from a system that likes to have Western outcomes and Western research process. So this project here, I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'm going to talk about one aspect of the findings that we came across, but basically we've been running this kaupapa for 2.5 years, based in the Bay of Plenty, largely here in Tauranga Moana, but we've also had a cohort in Te Kaha whanau Apanui, and really the majority of our learnings have come from those guys down there, and our subsequent work in this idea about potential and about shifting the fence have really grown out of this project. And so in a nutshell, the project is whanau enroll on a 12-week program, which is a lifestyle management program. It is based on exercise because from a Western point of view, we can prove the benefit of regular exercise on cardiac risk factors. So, you know, it's well proven that exercise reduces blood pressure and cholesterol levels. And for a Western system that thinks weight's important, we know that waist circumference and weight are positively affected by an exercise and nutrition program, etc., etc. So the Western framework for it was a 12-week program where whanau come as a group, so not as an individual. We're not enrolling individuals into the research project, we're including whanau clusters, and that gives us an ability to analyse this data as a collective. So we're not just going to do individual data analysis. So in traditional research sense, you put all the individuals that came into the project, you analyse the data, their individual data together, and make some assumptions based on that. This trial allows us to do collective analysis on each whanau group that enrolls, because that conforms more to a Māori worldview, this type of, they call it a cluster analysis in statistics, because that's what we're on about. We're not about the individual, we're about how does this work collectively for this group of people. So that's one cool thing about this trial, is our ability to do a collective analysis. Participants enroll, and in a good Western science randomized control trial, we've got to have a control group. A control group traditionally does not get the intervention. From a kaupapa Māori perspective, we can't do that. We can't say, oh, we know this works, but you guys aren't going to get it. So what we did is we made each whanau group their own control. So they enroll at the beginning of the program, and then they do the initial assessment for the research. And then they do nothing for 6 weeks. And then they have another assessment. So that 6-week period becomes a control period where they didn't do anything. So they become their own control. They have their second assessment, and then they start on the 12-week program and then have a third assessment at the end. So we're able to deliver the trial to everyone in the same way so that no one misses out. We developed their 12-week program based on the results of their assessment, and that is not just exercise and nutrition, so it's a full holistic Māori worldview lifestyle management program. Each whanau can tell us what they want. So if they say to us, well, our biggest issue in our whanau is our mindset, then we will tailor the 12-week program strongly in that direction. So there certainly will be the exercise and nutrition components of it, but sorry, the door just opened, so I'm a little bit distracted. But the main impetus for that whanau will be about mindset, because that's what they've told us their main concern is for them. So we have a whanau hui at the beginning, talk to them about what their problems are, what they think the solutions are, and then we build the 12-week program based on that. And then we have a hui with them at the end to say, how did that work? And interestingly, when we first started the research, we modified the methodology based on the first sets of whanau that went through, because they weren't only telling us how it was for them, they were telling us how to better do our research project. So we listened to them, and the methodology has definitely morphed over the 2.5 years that we've been running it. So that's also an interesting nuance for reporting back in a Western system that says you wrote this in the proposal, yet you did that, which is different. So that's our experience from this 12-week program. And a really short overview, but the main finding, like I said, is this thing about a flourishing mindset. And this is where I think I mentioned this idea about knowing our potential and using our potential to move forward and to improve Māori health came from. So in whanau Apanui, we had really awesome recruitment. In fact, we were so busy we had to say, slow down a bit, we can't take you all at one time. So we had this really awesome recruitment process down there, and everyone was really engaged. And when we got to a point and it kind of stopped, and we said, we've got capacity, we can enroll more of your community. And it became quite obvious that there was a portion of the community that weren't ever going to engage with us for whatever reason. So we had some co-design workshops thinking about a subsequent project about why would this portion of the community engage, but this portion of the community wouldn't. And this is where the idea of a flourishing mindset came from. So just looking at some evidence from a Western point of view. So if this is our definition of what mental health is, a state of successful performance of mental function, resulting in productive activity, fulfilling relationships with people, and the ability to adapt to change and cope with adversity, then the presence of mental health can be described as a state of flourishing. And I really like the word flourishing. I mean, it's a Tā Mason jury word as well. And it means, brightening, opening, progressing. It means beauty. It means all the positive things that we want for our people. So our future work will therefore focus on, and this is for lifestyle management of heart disease, assessing mindset and behaviours related to mindset through a Māori lens, and then shifting that mindset into a flourishing perspective. So we've developed something called a flourishing mindset package, which fingers crossed will get some funding so that we can run it, but we'll see how that goes. So this flourishing mindset package is really about setting people up to understand their potential before delivering them a nutrition intervention or an exercise intervention or traditional lifestyle management, or even from a Māori point of view, lifestyle management. Because if you're going to support someone to understand how aspects of wairua might support them in their life, they have to be in the right place to know that they can cope with that. And so the Flourishing Mindset package is really around the idea of setting people up to understand that they have the potential to be whatever they want to be, and that the future is bright and flourishing. So offering health interventions to whanau who have a flourishing mindset should theoretically result in increased engagement, adherence, and improved outcomes for lifestyle diseases such as heart disease and diabetes. That's kind of, you know, sticking our philosophy into a Western box because that's what's required. But essentially that's what it is. It's like people don't want to be unwell. People don't want to feel gross and be depressed, have diabetes. People don't set out in their life to have those things. But if you've lived with something, for example, diabetes, for a long time, how do you know that you can live without it? How do you know that you can move beyond those boundaries? And so the Flourishing Mindset package is really opening people to the idea that that potential exists. Not sure if that makes sense. Usually in these talks, people are already yelling at me from the audience. So hopefully you're not yelling at me. So that's kind of moving forward. And some of the problems that we have as Māori functioning in the current health system is being able to fulfill a Māori worldview within the constraints of the system, which is what we've already talked about. And so some of this comes down to how we integrate Māori in medical, or Māori in health, or Māori in anything that's not Māori. And so if we go back to my two stolen images, Tao Mason Jury talks about this idea of an interface space. So he says that to create something new and innovative, potentially you step outside of any world that you exist in, so Māori world or the Western medical world, and you stand in a third space, or the interface space, and you draw from each space the things that are most important to create something different and new. So the idea of creating a service or a research project where you take some stuff from Western medicine, because we're not saying that Western medicine is bad and should be obliterated from the planet. We're just saying it's not the be all and end all. And you take what's important from Māori health and you tie or you weave them together, and you get a new and innovative program. And that's what the interface space idea is about. And so this is what Tao Mason says. He says it's possible for Western science and Indigenous paradigms to find some common ground without compromising the foundations upon which either is situated. And I think that's really important. It's not about saying this is better than that, or it's about equity for, in this case, Māori health with Western science. And so this creates your innovative programs or services, and it combines two worlds that are quite disparate. But for this to work, it really needs to be underpinned by Māori principles, and then must be strong Māori leadership. So this idea could be developed up, but if there's not strong Māori leadership within this type of process, then there's not equity. It also needs strong clinical leadership, and I suppose going back to the equity thing, there needs to be equity in that relationship. So gone are the days where it's acceptable to have one Māori person on your research team when there are 5 others. Gone are the days where there's this tokenism for Māori in any leadership position in health. There must be equity in leadership for Māori. And this is just talking about in a research process or a service delivery process, but I think we need to be pushing for that more and more overall. This integration of Māori and medical allows us to have the service user or the whanau as the central focus. And this isn't the patient-focused approach where we think about what the patient would like, but it's actually having that person at the table, that whanau at the table. So this is where co-design comes into this conversation. We've actually got the people at the table with us. They're part of the team. There's equity in the relationship between, say, a research team or a service provision team and community. Good thing about this is we can report it for the system. considering the constraints of the system, but we're also able to report it for our people in the way that our people want it. And so this is why this type of method is really good for both sides of the story. And this isn't a framework that we use, but if you're interested in the literature and what's happening currently in this space, then He Pikinga Waiora is comes from Maori Hudson's group at Waikato, and it's an implementation framework for a co-design using a Māori model. And so if you're in a non-Māori organisation and you know that it might be quite difficult to implement a Māori worldview in your workspace, then this is a really good tool to sell it, if you need to sell it to people who sign off on things in your organisation. But it's actually a really good step-by-step process if you've never done co-design before, if this is your first foray into trying to implement things Māori within your constrained space. It's not the be-all and end-all in terms of frameworks, and remembering also that frameworks are academic constructs. A framework is a way that an academic thinks about the world. So yes, it is a step-by-step process, but we have to acknowledge that frameworks are Pākehā. That's no disrespect to any Māori frameworks that are around, because there's heaps of them and we all use them, but we're constrained by the fact that it is a framework. Use this, it's really good, and if you can Google it as well. If you Google He Pikinga Waiora, comes up with quite a lot of information about their actual research project and some other resources that they've got available too. Okay, we're almost there. In fact, look, it's a summary slide. Okay, so this is what we know. There's this equity issue and it needs a remedy, and it needs one fast, because I don't want to be having this talk in 5 years' time and that slide that I showed you is still orange and red. I mean, those of you who have been working in this space for years know that nothing changes. And so for things to change, we have to make a dramatic shift, not just nudging our mates and telling them they could do better, but something really significant. We know that people in communities are engaged with their health and that they have the answers. We just don't utilise our communities well enough to help us to create the answers. It is still a top-down approach where the system makes the decisions and delivers the service, and it should be the other way around. Iwi and whanau do not often see their own potential. There are things like historical trauma, ingrained beliefs, colonisation, that result in the way that we all see the world. And as Māori, we need to understand our flourishing, what flourishing means for us, and the potential that arises when we flourish, because we'll take over the world. Imagine if Māori had a flourishing mindset, or we're flourishing perpetually. The way that we see the world is the best way to see the world. So that's an avenue that maybe we can all think about how we enact that for our people. Create programs, services, projects that disrupt the status quo, provide equity for a Māori worldview everywhere. So I often talk about starting to feel comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's about arguing, and that's about standing up and saying, hey, this isn't right, and saying things need to change and they need to change now. Disrupting the status quo needs to happen, and it needs to happen sooner rather than later. And I really like this quote: the only thing that interferes with my learning is my education. And I think that even I have to be cognizant of this, is that my learning comes from a Western framework. The cool letters that people think are all around my name, they don't mean very little in the Māori world. In fact, they don't mean anything in the Māori world. And we need to see that in our education that we have, and what constrains each of us because of that learning that we've had in the system. And finally, I'll leave you with this whakatauki, which is an old one, but I really like it because it's about our potential. it's about our ability to see the awe in what we've been given in this life and using the potential that we have. So that's it from me.
Oh, kia ora everyone. Ngā mihi nui, kia koe, that was awesome. Thank you. I'm just going to check to see if we've got any questions, and there doesn't seem to be. Oh, everybody understood everything.
Well, they've all gone for coffee.
Yeah. But if you do have any questions, now's the time to click on the little button that says Q&A. Type up your questions for Anna, and let us know if you have any kōrero. And I really enjoyed hearing more about, you know, the idea of, yes, we are working towards wanting equity, but actually it's more than that, and it's talking about, you know, liberation, and I like the idea of refashioning the fence, which is it's just, you know, a different way of thinking. I was wondering, I have a little question, is as we move towards that process of moving towards equity, in that process, do you think we are kind of refashioning the fence as we do that? A little bit. Do we have the chicken mesh up?
I don't think we're anywhere near the chicken mesh, to be honest.
At this stage, maybe it's a little hole in the bottom.
Yeah, I think there are patches where the fence has got holes in it.
Oh, that's good.
Where there's some cool stuff going on in a community, or there's a cool initiative and someone's punched a hole in their portion of the fence, yes, and they can see through it. But other than that, I think, like I said, it's about some kind of dramatic shifts of disruption.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, kia ora, we just had a little, not really a partai, but acknowledgement from Nathan. Kia ora, Nathan.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any partai? Everyone's very quiet. Oh, here's another one. Sorry.
Okay, so this is a question that says, I'm interested to know what was in the Flourishing Mindset package and who delivered it, and what changes did you see through the program? So Flourishing Mindset is in development at the moment, so we've been co-designing the Flourishing Mindset package for the last 12 months. We haven't started implementing it yet. So I can't tell you what the benefit was. I can only think about what the potential benefit of delivering the packages. We do a bit of a version of it at the moment based on the knowledge that we gained through the trial that we're currently doing. But I can give you more information hopefully in 6 months' time when we've done a bit of implementation.
We'll get you in for another webinar. Any other partai, anybody? No, everyone's pretty quiet. Oh, well, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Anna, for your whakaaro and your kōrero with us today. Don't forget to fill in your evaluation form, team. That really helps inform what we're doing as well. Also, just a reminder that this is, we've got a series of webinars. So the next webinar is happening in a fortnight's time. And that is on the 28th of March with Leila Linden Tonga, and Leila will be doing a webinar on digital literacy 101, so digital tools for communication, some tips and tricks that you can link into. So you'll be able to register for the webinar early next week, and you can do that either by going onto our website, which is www.toitangata.co.nz, and just go into our events calendar, or if you're on Facebook with us, we'll be putting it through there, or alternatively, if you're on our mailing list, we'll be sending it out through our mailing list. If you want to get on our mailing list, by all means do, just go to the Contact Us page on our website, put in your details, and just in the message body, let us know that you want to be added to the mailing list. So kia ora whanau, enjoy the rest of your day. I actually just wanted to grab one of the whakatauki that Anna used. E tipu e rea mō ngā rā o tō ao. So grow and branch forth for the days destined to you. Kia ora.